Hello to everyone joining. Thank you for joining us on a Friday as well, which is not when we usually do our webinars. You can see we've got 12, 14 people joining. So nice to see everyone. We'll just give it 5 minutes to give people a chance to join, and then I'll hand over to Andrew for our release webinar. If you want to say hi in the chat, that'd be really nice. It'd be nice to know where you're joining from. If you've got any snacks for the webinar, what you're kind of hoping to get out of it, just say hi. If you're looking forward to move into Payara Community, got plans for it already, feel free to use the chat function. Got a hand raised. Hi, oh hi Michael. See Michael's waving at me. Yeah, I can see some more people joining. Just for the new people who've joined, we're just hanging on till 2:05 to give people a chance to join. And if you want to say hi in the chat, feel free. It'd be nice to know where people are joining from. What are your thoughts on Payara Community? Are you looking forward to adopting it? It's a Friday afternoon when Andrew and I are in the UK. So gearing up for the weekend. Oh, apologies. I think the chat's disabled. Thanks for letting me know in the question and answer. I'll try and get that sorted out. Okay, it should be working now if you want to say hi in the chat. Apologies about that. Thanks for letting us know, Michael. Nice to meet you, Gabrielle. We've got Laurent from France, Ecuador, Germany, nice spread already, Portugal, Egypt, UK, New Jersey, Switzerland, Slovenia, Cambridge. It's nice to see everyone joining. Sweden, Guatemala, a lot of places which I imagine have better weather than we do at the moment. India, South Africa, Hamburg in Germany. Hi everyone. Dusseldorf in Germany. Another person from France. Really nice mix of people today. The Philippines, Rochester, New York, USA. Andrew has just been to New York, but not New York State, New York, the Big Apple. So I think we've had kind of people joining has slowed off a little bit and it's nearly 5 past. So I'll kick things off. We've got Gabrielle's asking how many people have joined. We've got 51 people with us today, and the webinar will also be recorded. So we'll be sharing it around with people who registered and see if anyone else joins during the session. So yeah, thank you so much. Today is the day we've released Payara Community after Alpha 3 and 4. This is the first stable release, and it kind of marks Payara Community being the main release we work on. So it's quite a big day for us, and Andrew has been the magic behind it all with the rest of the dev team at Payara. So I'm going to hand over to him, and he's going to tell you all about it. Just before I start, obviously the chat's working now, and we've also got the Q&A function. So if you have any questions during the session, please put them there. If they're related to what Andrew's talking about, I'll jump in and give them to him. And if not, if we have a bit of time at the end, I'll direct them to him there. So yeah, please send your questions across. And now I'll mute myself and hand over to Andrew.
Right, and so with that, we press the share button and hope we get it right. That one. Right, hopefully, let's just get my zooms all in the right place. Put that there. Right, so hopefully we can all see the screen and everything like that. Hopefully you can all hear me. I'll try and speak up to make sure you can all hear me properly. Somebody please yell at me if they can't. And so, Payara 6 Community is out, as the big white title would hopefully lead you to believe. So it came out, or is it's now published to Maven Central. I'm not sure if the announcement email's gone out yet. I hope it has, but it is now published to everywhere that you should be able to download it from. It is all there. Coincidentally, there is another release of Payara 5 and out at the same time, but this is primarily focused on Payara 6. So let's get started. The duration there of 60 minutes is very vague. It's probably going to be less than that because I speak quite quickly. But let's get going. So who am I? My name's Andrew Pielage. I am a senior software engineer at Payara. I'm the technical leader for Payara Platform. So that's encompassing Payara Server and Payara Micro. So in that role, I kind of try and help prioritize things and manage the team and act as the guru of many things. I've been at Payara for many years now, coming up to 9 in January, I believe it is. So I do know quite a lot of the ins and outs. Even if I was the dumbest person in the world, enough would have sunk in over 9 years that I know enough to get by. So the webinar overview. So I'm going to cover, so I've kind of clumped it into 3 main areas here to talk about the release of what has changed. Obviously, it has gone from a Payara 5 to a Payara 6, but hopefully more has changed than just a number to lure you all in. So I'll chat about that, and then I'll also talk about some of the advisories. So some of the things which might catch you out or that you should be aware of during a migration from 5 to 6, or if you're just jumping straight into 6. And then also a small bit at the end of what's next. It's at some point will be Payara 7, but there are many more things to do between now and Payara 7. So what has changed? So we've got a number of things here. So Jakarta EE 8, that's now become Jakarta EE 10. That got released after a few delays. It finally got released a little while ago now, and Payara 6 managed to squeak in at the last second to be there in time to be released alongside it with a compatible implementation. So passing the TCK and all that jazz. So I'll talk about what's coming up or what has changed and all of these in slightly greater detail moving on forward. MicroProfile 4 is now MicroProfile 5 in Payara 6. So functionally there, that is actually just a namespace change. The functional changes, so the actual new sexy features, etc., those are coming in MicroProfile 6. But just as just to make it be obvious there, Payara 6 is now on MicroProfile 5, so you need to make sure you update all your dependencies if you're using that. JDK 8 to JDK 11. So this is in reference to the minimum version of Java that you need to use to run it. This is also actually the compile version as well. So the compile version is changed from 8 to 11, and also the minimum runtime has changed from 8 to 11. So with that, obviously you need to be aware, if on the client side of things, of any of your exports and opens shenanigans, particularly if you're using the Payara client, because we do require some of those still. And then finally, the transformer, the Java EE transformer, that is obviously switched, because it would be a bit annoying if whenever you deployed an EE9 or EE10 application to Payara 6, that it would transform it back to EE8. It's now flipped to the other way. So for Payara 6, it should be transforming EE8 applications to EE10. So to go into slightly greater detail of what's changed in Jakarta EE10. So jumping from 8 to 10, I'm going to roll in some of the things that changed in 9 as well, because that is largely what you see on the screen now of jumping from Java EE8 to Java EE9. The main change was a namespace change. There were a couple other really minor changes, but the big one was the namespace change. So this is the package namespace change, and also the Maven group ID namespace of changing from Javax to Jakarta. So that is an annoying one if you're running, if you've actually got your applications, because you've either got to use the transformer or update everything and switch the package names. But yes, jumping from 8 to 10, be aware there is the namespace change. There's also the JDK change. So similar to how Payara now requires you to run on Java 11, so does Jakarta EE10. So that I believe was brought in 9.1, where they changed it, the minimum Java version from 8 to 11. And from 9.1 to 10, it's still at 11. So be aware of that as well. So from the specification update point of view, there are many updates, far too many to actually fit into, unless I was an absolute guru and on absolutely every single specification. I wouldn't be able to fit it in an hour. But so on the major update point of view, we've got authentication 3.0, we've got concurrency 3.0, we've got CDI 4.0, we've got expression language 5.0, JSON binding 3.0, security 3.0, faces 4.0, servlet 6.0, SOAP with attachments 3.0, tags 3.0, XML binding 4.0, XML web services 4.0, and then also a number of minor updates. I'm not going to go through all the minor ones, because I imagine I just blew all your minds and you glazed over as I rattled off all of those. But essentially, almost every single specification has been updated for Java EE10. Some of them major with breaking changes in there. Some of them just minor ones to either with minor updates functionality wise, or just minor updates because they needed to bump themselves up, typically from going from Java EE JDK 8 to 11, or similar things to that. So I just realized I jumped over something in my own notes when in my haste with the haste to carry on. But in the namespace change as well, you do also have some changes in not just name, but or not just in the packages, but in just generally the namespace. From going from Java EE to Jakarta EE, some things have also changed, such as the URL for your XML schemas. Those are no longer on java.net or on any of the Oracle sites. They're over on an Eclipse site now. So when you're updating, for example, the faces config to 4.0, you need to point that at a different URL. It's changed. You can't just expect it all to work magically. So be aware of that. And I believe in my notes, I covered that a little bit more later on. So back to where I was before I jumped over. And then also in the specification updates, we have an actual brand new profile. So we typically previously Java EE and Jakarta EE had the platform. I'll call it platform profile because it always feels weird not to stick the word profile on there, even though I'm 90% certain it's not actually called the platform profile. But you've got the platform profile or full profile, and then the web profile. And now you have the new core profile. So the core profile is bringing in CDI Lite. This is predominantly for much smaller runtimes, more focused on container runtimes. So it's for that kind of thing. And MicroProfile 6, which I'll come to slightly later on, that actually now depends, or it's in the plan that it will now depend on core profile, because MicroProfile previously was in a bit of a not weird state, but it didn't depend on any Java EE profile, but it made use of certain specifications, CDI being one of the big ones. With MicroProfile 6, it will now actually depend on the core profile, but that is in the plan for it. So with that, you get all of the CDI Lite and JAX-RS and the JSON specifications. I can't remember all the core profile ones off the top of my head. Concurrencies in there as well, I think, maybe. But yes, core profile is now a thing, and it's here. So Payara Server, Payara Server Full or Platform and Payara Server Web Profile are both supporting core profile. They're both being certified against it, because core profile, by and large, to reduce it down to probably a slightly insulting terminology, it is essentially a subset of web profile. So it is smaller than web profile, in the same manner that web profile is a smaller subset of the specifications as platform. Core profile is a smaller subset of specifications than web profile, but with CDI Lite in there. So, and then moving on. Was I about to get a question?
Yeah, so just apologies if you cover this further on, but just before we move on from 8 to 10, Mike asks, how do you use the transformer to go from EE8 to EE10?
I do have a little bit on it later.
Okay.
So I will go into it a little bit there, but it is, the support for it should be there. I'll go into it in greater detail there, but
Okay.
there is an extension that we provide. It's not currently bundled into Payara 6. It is, as we kind of define it, an extension. So you've got to drop it in yourself, but it is published not to Maven Central. I think it's published to our Nexus repository, but it's essentially a case of drop it in, and then it should TM just work.
Nice. Okay, that's a little bit of a teaser for later. Yeah. I'll let you carry on.
So drop specifications in EE8 to 10, we do have some drop specifications. So moving forward, we'll potentially start seeing more of this going on, because for any of you who are aware of some of the internals, or not politics, but processes of Eclipse and how they certify specifications or ratify certifications. A lot of the optional specifications are currently being looked at for, do they need to be optional? Should they just be moved out? Should they just be not optional anymore? Should they be in a separate profile? So some of the older ones, some of the low-hanging fruit ones of those which weren't really used have been dropped, such as managed beans. That's been deprecated for EE10. It's not gone yet, but it's just deprecated. But embedded EJB containers and entity beans, those are now just gone. Those aren't deprecated, they're just gone. So while implementations might still support them because you're not bound to the specification. The specification doesn't say that you can't support embedded EJB containers. It's no longer in the specification. So be aware of that if you were using the embedded EJB containers or entity beans. And then component names. So this kind of harkens back slightly to what I was saying with the namespace change of lots of components have changed. So if you were previously looking through the GitHub sources or following certain specifications, some of those names may be changed. This is particularly relevant if you were actually looking at the old name for the Maven dependency. So for example, if you were looking at the JSP implementation dependency, that's no longer called JSP, it's now called WASP. So update your dependencies if you were ever using the implementation side of that yourself. So just off the top of my head, the JSP has changed to WASP. Security is now called Exosia. I think that's the one nobody is quite sure how it's pronounced, because it's, I think, Greek. So, well, presumably the Greeks know how to pronounce it if it is Greek, but nobody else outside of Greece knows how to pronounce it. And then expression language is now called Expressly. There are some other minor ones in there as well. Some of them you won't actually register, such as EJB is no longer called EJB anymore. It's Jakarta Enterprise Bean, so JEBs now. Rather than EJB, they're JEBs. But then JSF is now called Jakarta Faces. So there are some minor changes hidden around. The JSF one is slightly less minor, because that actually is important for things like your schema files. Of the actual name of it has changed. It's not just a URL, it's not just changing from java.net to Jakarta EE, the actual name of it has changed. Yeah, already gone through that. And then finally, TCKs. A lot of the TCKs changed. So this is a bit more on the geeky internal sides of actually building a server or certifying a server. Continuing on from some of the work that went into Jakarta EE9, with Jakarta EE10, a lot of TCKs underwent rather large overhauls to make them standalone from the main TCK zip. This was in an effort to actually update it, because the actual old the TCKs used to run under something I think it's called the Java test framework, which was a myriad of Anth scripts essentially, which ran the huge TCK, several gigabytes. They've tried to now split it up into be more standalone. This is useful from a testing point of view, of it's easier to test the smaller bits of it, but it's also useful from a certification point of view, of it actually helps the specifications themselves certify newer versions, because there was this gigantic interweaving dependencies that you get of, because everything's TCK is in the final TCK, how do you then verify the specification? Because you can't release the specification without releasing the TCK, and you can't release the TCK without releasing the specification. You get into an awful mess. So a lot of work has gone into that, but internally that just meant there was also a lot of work on our side of updating a lot of our runners to work with them. And it brought in a number of new problems, such as a lot of them were moved over to use Maven. And how do you know if the Maven dependency that you're testing is actually the one that's published? How do you know? Because it would pass the signature test, but it might not pass the SHA test, for example. So a number of those problems were suddenly introduced, which are actually still being figured out. And the Maven POMs are also still quite fluid, because a number of them are hard-coded to Glassfish at the moment. So they're still ironing out a few of those problems. So advisories, things that you may come across when you're using Payara 6. The admin console. So if anybody's actually been paying attention to or trying to run the Glassfish milestones or the Payara milestones, you may have noticed the admin console broke. This is due to, so Glassfish and Payara are obviously sharing the admin console is still largely the same. The underpinnings of it is still Woodstock. The Woodstock and JSF templating are based on an extremely old version of JSF. I believe Arian used to say that's not JSF, but it was a really old version of JSF. I think it was a version of JSF2, which was then heavily edited to make the admin console work. Now that we're on JSF4, which actually introduced quite a few large changes, not just in features, but actually in how the JSF lifecycle itself worked. This broke quite a lot of things. So we have managed to get it to work. We got it to work by actually taking advantage of some existing functionality, which I believe was still there from Glassfish 4 or Glassfish 3.4 time, of supporting different JSF implementations. If you actually dig through the comments in the code, it was specifically name checking my faces. So we actually take advantage of that existing functionality, kind of fixed and added a couple bits to it, and we now package JSF 3 along with the admin console, because the admin console worked with JSF 3, doesn't work with JSF 4, so just package JSF 3 alongside it. This works for the most part, but we are still looking to fix it. There might still be a couple bits here and there which act a bit funny. Work is still happening on Woodstock itself to try and fix it for Glassfish, because I believe it's still broken on Glassfish. I haven't tried the very latest milestone 9, I think they're on now. I haven't tried that one, but given that a PR was only opened a couple days, actually I think it was today, to try and fix some of the things in Woodstock, presumably it's still broken there, but work is still happening to try and fix Woodstock to get everything running up again. But just in the meantime, be aware, while it works for us, there might be a few shaky bits here and there. The known one which constantly I run into is what I call the spinning wheel. You'll all be aware of this, of when you're using something and then Windows does the dreaded spinning wheel of it's doing something, but it won't tell you what it's doing. The admin console will also occasionally do this. We believe it is down to switching between Payara 5 and Payara 6. Some things get cached, essentially. So if you do run into it, in fact, I might be able to demonstrate it if I click between them a little bit, hopefully. If I go back to here. No, it's not happening. It's the usual demo scenario of the moment you want something to happen, it works. Break, damn you. There we go. I got the spinning wheel. So this spinning wheel, actually, yeah, I say this like you can see my mouse. I have no idea if you can see my mouse, but if you can't see my mouse, trust me that there is now a spinning wheel of it doing something.
We can see the wheel.
You can see the spinning wheel of doom. Good. So this is, as I said, we believe it's coming from things being cached. So if you do run into this, A, it's annoying, but B, there is a workaround of essentially either clear your cache or use private browsing if you are jumping between Payara 5 and Payara 6. Because what you'll end up getting when you get the spinning wheel of doom, if I just give it a random name and pick something random, it should still work. It would just occasionally you will get this kind of problem where it doesn't, the actual URL changes, and then rather than just staying with common/index, and also occasionally the CSS, as in the styling itself, might just kind of break. It's just the styling, the page itself is fine. It was just the styling might break. So be aware of that. And the workaround, as I say, is use private browsing or clear your cache. And then we get to Transformer. So as I previously spoiled, on Payara 5, the Transformer was bundled in with the server. And now moving into Payara 6, we reworked it slightly into an extension so that it's actually got a tiny little API, and you can actually provide now your own implementation of the Transformer. So while we still provide a Transformer implementation, it's just not bundled in the server. So you can find it, as I say, on GitHub. If I go to GitHub, if you want to actually see the source and edit it yourself, it is on GitHub, assuming my internet will actually work. And Transformer, so it's there. So there's the source if you wanted to get to it, but it is also actually available, published on it's our Nexus instance, but it is also available here. So in this Payara artifacts, so we sometimes use this repo for things that we didn't necessarily want to push to Maven Central, and the the latest build of the transformer is currently in here. So the server already includes the some of it, but if you want the transformer part of it to work, let's see if I can remember the there we go. I can't remember it. Grab 1.1, download that and drop it into your Glassfish modules directory, and then that should TM actually automatically transform things. So there is some updated documentation around that as well. There are some system properties that you might want to configure to either enable or disable it. But off the top of my head, it should just be a case of drop it into the Glassfish modules directory. So that's just where all the other libraries of Payara live. Restart the server so that it actually loads it up, and then just deploy your Java EE application, and it should all work for you. Should. Please raise issues if it doesn't. But it should work. So just be aware of that, of it's no longer in the server by default. That's the takeaway there of it should work, but it's just not in the server by default anymore. And then bean discovery. So this is one of the big changes which came out of, or not necessarily the biggest change, it was actually quite a minor change, but it's a very far-reaching change of the default bean discovery method for CDI has changed if you're providing an empty beans XML. It's changed from all to annotated. This would probably mean that some things which previously worked when you deploy them suddenly don't work. Because, if the beans weren't annotated, then or if your classes weren't annotated, they won't be picked up as beans by default anymore necessarily. So be very aware of that. That something that had deployed happily on Payara 5 may not deploy happily on Payara 6. You may need to either provide a beans XML and define the behavior yourself, of either set it to bean discovery mode all. Alternatively, there is a system property now that you can either define globally in the server or actually on the deployment itself, as admin deploy -- property. I don't have it, or I've got it written out for me, but I didn't write it out for you to see. But it's empty beans XML mode all. So this should also be in the documentation, Payara documentation, which should be updated for Payara 6 now. But there is now a property that you can define which changes the behavior back. So the beans XML, if it's an empty one, it will change back to all rather than annotated. So if you're coming into issues deploying something that works happily on 5 and on but doesn't on 6, see if turning that on might help. That's a backwards compatibility thing. It's in the CDI specification, but the actual name of the property itself was left entirely up to implementations. So for us, it's empty beans XML mode all. That's if you're doing it on the from the deploy command, or if you want to set it globally, fish.payara.deployment.emptybeans.xml mode all. I don't think there's an easy way to come up with a mnemonic to remember that, but if you do, please feel free to message me a handy mnemonic for remembering that. Alternatively, just look it up in the documentation. So JDK 11 is another advisee. So I mentioned this earlier, that brain engage, there we go, that with the move to JDK 11 coming from 8, you're now getting the Java module thing, module system, and all the reflection changes which came with that. Of suddenly you're not allowed to just reflect into everything and everywhere. There are exports and opens. So if you've ever looked at the Payara 6, actually, even if you've looked at the Payara 5 domain.xml, there are all these --add opens or --add exports in the JVM options. This is to allow Payara server to start, but you also need a similar thing if you've been using Payara embedded. So if you're using Payara embedded or the embedded GDB container, any of those kind of non-server based runtimes, you will potentially need to add all the exports and opens yourself, because otherwise on JDK 11 you'll get warnings about it. On JDK 17 it will just fail. It doesn't, with JDK 17, they stopped just warning you about it. It just doesn't work anymore. It will just go and explode. So be aware that if you're using Payara embedded in any of your testing, or just generally, although I don't think anybody does use Payara embedded outside of testing, be aware that you need to have these exports and opens. The easiest way, I don't think it's documented what each and every single one of the opens exports does yet, but the easiest way to know what you need is just look at the server domain.xml and copy them out of there. And then name changes. So I've already mentioned this one again. So this is constantly coming up. For brain engage. For some of them as well, it's not just Java to Jakarta name changes. Some of them have also changed just name generally. So for example, with the expression language ones, the package name is now Expressly. So be aware of that. You can't just change it from Java to Jakarta. You might, if you've been referencing Expressly, the implementation directly to take advantage of features in there, you have to mention Expressly now. But then also some of the system properties might have changed. So the one that the one that stuck in my mind anyway when we were doing various upgrade things was for getting the initial context factory for Jindy. So previously it was com.sun.jindy cos naming cnctx factory. That was buried deep inside Glassfish, the old Glassfish documentation. Moving forward into, I think they actually came in Glassfish 6 actually, but for Glassfish 7 definitely, and now Payara 6, that package name has changed to org.glassfish. So same Jindy cos naming cnctx factory. The class name hasn't changed, but the beginning of it has. It's no longer com.sun, it's org.glassfish. So that is not something we can control. That's a system property on your client side. So be aware that if you were specifically looking up the CNCTX factory via system property, that system property has changed. We don't currently have backwards compatibility for the old ComSun. It is on the backlog somewhere to add it in, but I don't know where on the backlog off the top of my head, deep somewhere. We have many things to work on, which I'll get to in a bit. And then just to reiterate again, some URLs have also changed. So faces, JSTL or tags, those URLs have changed. So those little bits at the top of your JSF and XML files where it's just a load of URLs, which not everybody quite registers what those URLs are doing. Those have changed. Be aware of it. So Archilian. So for those of you testing your applications against Payara, be aware that for Payara 6, the Archilian version has changed. So all the containers are still up there. They've all been updated. So Payara Micro, Payara Server Embedded, etc. Those have all been updated, but you now need the version 3. So I think they're currently on 3.0.alpha 6. You need to use that. The 2.4, I think the 2.4.6 version that was the previous most up-to-date version used in Payara 5. That does not work on Payara 6. It will just break and explode. So if as you move to Payara 6, be sure to update the Archilian dependency to 3.x. Support for the 2.x of Archilian will continue for a sense. We're not just leaving it for dead because Payara Enterprise continues for enterprise support for Payara 5 continues for a time. And so with that, the support for the Archilian connector will also continue for a time. And then IDE support. So unfortunately at the moment, I believe the IDE plugin support for Payara 6 and EE10 with it is not working, I think is the nicest way to put it. For essentially VS Code, Eclipse, IntelliJ and NetBeans, so the 4 main ones. Sorry, any Vim users, we don't have a plugin for you yet, but for the 4 main ones, the IDE support is not currently working. It is an absolute focus of ours right now. We are focusing on getting them up to date. I believe the VS Code one should be getting updated soon, or I shall avoid from giving dates, but I believe the VS Code one is the first to get done, closely followed by the Eclipse one. So I'll go into a little bit more of that later, but be aware that for Payara 6, the IDE plugins currently don't work, or might be broken in a few ways. So we are looking to fix that. If you feel free to raise issues, but we are aware that they either don't work or are broken in various ways. But we are working to fix them now. So unfortunately, you have to use Payara 6 a little bit like a Luddite and do it manually from a terminal. So just double check with Priya that my headset hasn't turned off and you weren't screaming at me about questions.
No, we have a couple of questions, but I thought I'd run them through at the end.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'm just aware of the time, so
but your headset's all good.
Good. So IDE support, as just mentioned, that is what we were just working on, so I can quite quickly move on from that. So NetBeans, Payara is actually bundled, the Payara plugin for NetBeans is actually bundled in with NetBeans, so we're somewhat tied to their release schedule. I believe we missed the code freeze for the, if it hasn't already come out yet, the next release of NetBeans. So the NetBeans one, we're looking to get in on for the next code freeze, which is next year at some point, February, I want to guess, but I'm sure somebody will scream at me that that's wrong. So NetBeans and IDE, IDEA, IntelliJ IDEA should be out next year. Eclipse and VS Code should be coming first, hopefully this year. MicroProfile 6 is also coming. So as mentioned, MicroProfile 5 was predominantly a namespace change, moving from the Java EE dependencies to the Jakarta ones. MicroProfile 6 is where a lot of the sexy new features are coming in. So it's out soon, and I'm not personally aware of when exactly. The current plan on the Eclipse website was the 15th of November. I don't know if that's still happening, but hopefully soon, TM. But with that, you're getting quite a few things. So open tracing, that's now gone. It's been replaced by a specification called open telemetry. So that's brought in to replace it. Metrics is also getting a major update from 4 to 5. Which brings with it some changes, such as some deprecations in there, such as metric type being removed, registry type and metric registry.type. Those are gone. But then you've also got some new things coming in, such as support for injecting metric registries via custom scopes. And then you've got a couple of minor updates to JWT and OpenAPI. And as mentioned way at the start, it does actually, or the plan is now to pull in the core profile itself. So MicroProfile will now officially have support for CDI Lite as of MicroProfile 6. So something we've been working on internally, I shan't go into gigantic detail on it because it's ludicrously complex and I haven't revised. Sorry, teacher, I didn't revise. But for the Catalina rework, we're doing a Catalina rework. So for those of you aware of the internals of Payara and Glassfish as well, the actual servlet engine that is used, though, is a fork of Apache Tomcat Catalina. It was forked many, many moons ago, I believe when it was on Tomcat 5 and Glassfish 3, I think. So it was rather than just pulling it in as a dependency and using it there, they actually forked the code and integrated it into the code base itself. We're looking to actually rework a lot of that. So rather than constantly having to actually kind of keep this old forked code base of Catalina and try and merge it with any changes that come into with the new one, we're actually now looking to pull in the newer version of Catalina as a dependency, and rather than actually forking it, actually just using it as a dependency and interacting with it via its APIs and services. So with that, we're also hopefully going to bring in all of the many and wonderful security and other functional improvements that have gone into Catalina and Tomcat since then. I believe Tomcat and Catalina are now on version 10 rather than version 5. So quite a few things hopefully coming in with there. But then also a big clean out of this code that has been around for many, many years, which when you dig into the comments of it, was a bit shaky in some places. Not to cast any aspersions to the Sun or Oracle teams. They did a very good job in actually forking it, but some of the comments would imply that some bits were a little bit shaky. So that's coming early next year. Hopefully, it's quite a large. It's in my own bad analogy way, I like to liken it to literally doing heart replacement surgery on the server. So we're hoping to get that done next year, but it is a lot of work and it's quite complicated. And then documentation. So any developer's favorite words, favorite to read, least favorite to write. We're actually looking to do a major rework of the documentation. So previously our documentation has always kind of been on top of the Glassfish one, which was always a little bit of a weird situation. We're now looking to actually, now that the Glassfish documentation is fully open source, we are now looking to actually merge them together so that the documentation should be a bit more cohesive and easy to read, rather than you constantly having to switch between reading the Glassfish documentation or the Payara documentation. It should now hopefully be slightly more coherent. And James has promised me, James, somebody who works for us internally, he's promised me that it's going to be done for Q1 2023. So if it isn't done, you know who to go to. So what's next? So first up, sorry for any Payara 5 fans, we do have the Payara 5 terminal release currently scheduled for the 7th of December. This is just for community. So community has always been much more of a rolling release. So now that Payara 6 is out, we're going to look to do one final release of Payara 5 to hopefully update as much as we can and also fix as much as we can. So we're not necessarily looking to put in features into the final release of Payara 5. It's very much a update it as much as we can with, as in component upgrades, and then also fix as much as we can. So we're currently looking to get that out in time for Christmas. The current date is the 7th, but I shall just say before Christmas. And then as mentioned, it's primarily a bug fix release, but Payara 5 Enterprise support continues, I believe, until 2028 at least. So Payara 5 is not dead. It's just there's not going to be any more releases of Payara 5 Community. It rolls over into Payara 6. So if you want to get continued support for Payara 5, move to Enterprise, please. That is my very weak attempt at sales. I will leave it to John and our magical sales team to better sell it than I can. So Payara 6 Enterprise, which would probably be the next logical point to ask about, of what if I want support for Payara 6? This is currently scheduled to be out for the end of Q1 2023. So we're looking to make sure that everything's properly nailed down first before suddenly jumping everything to Payara 6 Enterprise. So we're looking to get all the extensions and ecosystem updated. So that will be all the IDE plugins, all the extensions such as the notifiers and the certificate management and the monitoring console. We're going to look at getting all of those updated for Payara 6, making sure they absolutely work as best as they can. Making sure the upgrade tool works going from Payara 5 to Payara 6, and making sure that we've got a clear documented path of how to actually do it, because obviously you run into various things of JavaX to Jakarta? Do you just use the transformer tool? What if you don't want to use the transformer tool, etc.? So we're hoping to get a clear documented guide and tool to help you do that. And that is that.
Great.
Question time.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And we've got quite a few questions, which I thought I'd save to the end. So I know you spoke about JSF earlier. We've got a couple of questions on JSF. First from Deependra, is there any plan to switch the implementation of JSF from Payara to MyFaces or something else?
Not at the moment. So at the time we're sticking with Payara. Again, pronunciation, nobody's quite sure, but we are currently looking to stay with Payara for the time being. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, the plan. And then from Carlos, also on the JSF and admin console, wouldn't you consider rewriting the admin console in JSF4?
Yes. So there is a it's been on the cards for many years. It's always something, obviously, as one of the most user facing things that you get with Payara server of with the admin console. It's long been on the cards for us to update the admin console, either just to update it or to actually rewrite it from scratch. So yes, it is on the cards that we're going to look at either updating Woodstock. As I say, Woodstock itself is actually currently being looked at by multiple people because it's not just Payara that use it. Woodstock is looking to be updated to JSF4, but separately it is also on the cards, but still quite early days of, we haven't fully looked into how we would do it yet, but it is on the cards that at some point TM we will be looking to potentially rewrite the admin console.
Great, thank you. That's something to look forward to. And this one, I think even I could answer myself, but I'll pass over to you. What's your suggestion for new projects starting now, version 5 or 6?
So right now, good question. Well, good question, obviously, but complicated question. Depends what you're looking for. Obviously, if you're still if you're looking for the absolute latest stuff, Payara 6 would make the most sense. Obviously, as with any new software, there might be the odd quirk here and there or bug here and there. But if you're looking for the absolute latest things, Payara 6, I would say, as in, if you're looking to use the absolute latest things, it would make more sense to work with Payara 6 and potentially deal with any of those quirks or things, because moving forward, it makes any translation of moving from Payara 5 to Payara 6 null and void if it's not there. And also, MicroProfile 6 is not coming back to Payara 5, or it's not currently in the plans anyway to bring it back to Payara 5. So if you moving forward, to keep the MicroProfile specifications going, and any new features within Payara itself, go with Payara 6. If, however, you are looking to just keep firm and stable, put the sales hat back on, potentially stick with Payara 5 and look at getting Payara Enterprise.
Yeah, exactly. Our team pointed out that, if it's for production, for mission critical systems, you want Payara Enterprise 5. If you want all the new stuff and development projects, Payara Community 6. And then we'll have, as Andrew's talked about, Payara Enterprise 6 coming, which will bring you the best of all worlds. Saeed's asked for migration procedure from Payara 5 to Payara 6. We do have a guide on this in the works. Probably more aligned with when we've got Payara 6 Enterprise to help those who are using it in mission critical systems. And then I'll run through some other questions. A nice kind of opinion one from Gabrielle. What is the IDE you suggest to use to develop on Payara 6?
Sorry, what was that? What is the
IDE you suggest to use to develop on Payara 6?
Suggest, right? That's what I missed. So, I was going to say, because we all use different types within I thought it was, what do you use? That's just a loaded question, because everybody's different. We're all beautiful snowflakes. I'm not the person to ask, because actually I'm one of the Luddites who typically doesn't use it with an IDE. As in, I don't typically use the IDE plugins. I typically tend to just use it from the terminal because I'm weird and old. I still use Vim for some things. That'll show you how old and Luddite I am. I believe, though, if I was to recommend any, the NetBeans one, if nothing else, is good because it is the favorite love child of Mr. Gaurav Gupta, and he is the kind of lead for a lot of our ecosystem things. So it tends to get a bit of a favorite spot in his heart there. So the NetBeans one is very recommended, if nothing else as well, because it's actually bundled in with NetBeans. You don't have to pull it in yourself or anything like that.
Yeah, and Manish says this question could lead to a potential war.
Yes,
so
it could.
we better move on before we don't want a war on a Friday. So another question from Carlos. Would you happen to know whether Eclipse IDE has an automatic code migrator for the Jakarta namespace like IntelliJ seems to have? And would you consider developing it as part of the Eclipse Payara Tools plugin?
So part one of that, no, I don't know off the top of my head, because I don't use the Eclipse IDE. In fact, I'm not going to start the war. But I don't use the Eclipse IDE, so I don't know offhand if it does. But part two of, yes, we are looking at rolling in the support for the transformer actually into the Payara plugin itself within Eclipse. So actually for Eclipse, apparently I missed mentioning this, or maybe I've already forgotten. For the Eclipse IDE plugin itself, we're actually rewriting it. So I'm not personally aware of the major internals or anything, but Eclipse for their plugins had a IDE API update. So for any plugins who want to now use the new API, it's not compatible with the old one. You've just got to rewrite it. So we're actually in the process of rewriting the Eclipse IDE plugin. So step one, rewrite it and release it with support for Payara 6. But then the step two is also to potentially roll in the transformer support.
Great, fab. And then we have Carlos, who remembers some time ago converting HK2 into a fully developed CDI implementation was part of the Payara roadmap, or at least part of plans. Has it been definitely abandoned?
Ooh, I don't know about abandoned is a strong word. Definitely put on the back burner. So there was some work that went into it. We were looking originally at actually getting it to so we did map it all out of what it needed to get to be a full CDI specification, I believe, or was it DI? Can't remember. So initially we looked at getting it to pass the dependency injection TCK and getting it to there, but then we did also map out what it would be required to get to the CDI, to go from DI to CDI, because it is a little bit of a jump. I believe, though, it was eventually put on the back burner. So if you want to be brutal, it's abandoned for now. It may get picked up again later, because it is still something we are interested in doing. But for the time being, it is on the back burner / abandoned, depending on how brutal language you want to use.
Okay, great. Lauren is asking, he is not sure if you misheard, MicroProfile 6 won't have web specifications anymore. Does it mean that JSP and Servlet won't be available with MicroProfile 6?
To that, I say, did MicroProfile ever have the JSP and Servlet? So MicroProfile 6 is now pulling in the core profile specification. So previously it did just kind of depended on the odd little dependency here and there. So CDI, JAX-RS, maybe concurrency. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. JSON processing probably. So, or some of the JSON binding, maybe whichever way around. It had one of the JSON, if not both of the JSON specifications, but MicroProfile itself never depended on web profile. It just pulled in a random grab bag of specifications. Now it specifically depends on core profile. From a specification support point of view, I don't think much changed there. Core profile was very much designed for almost the same kind of thing that MicroProfile was. I'm sure somebody will hate me for saying that, but it was essentially, from off the top of my head, I don't think anything's been lost from MicroProfile 6 on the Jakarta specification point of view.
We have the question, is VS Code plugin on the roadmap? I think you covered that, maybe to reiterate.
Sorry.
VS Code plugin on the roadmap?
I believe I mentioned it, yes.
Yeah,
It is currently in the works. We've got bug fixes going into it now, with hope. It's currently hoped, wish upon a star, that it should be released in December, if not earlier.
Okay, great. And then I think we've gone through some of them. Carlos, I've seen you've got 2 more questions. One of them is about a specific bug. So with that, I'll just remind you that we do have a system where we can upvote and downvote bugs on GitHub. So if it's been flagged already or raised as an issue, you can upvote it or downvote it for its the precedence with which it's given. It's about deploying JDK 17 applications onto Payara 5 on Windows machines. So yeah, please do raise that as an issue and upvote it and downvote it if it's something that's a priority to you. And then Carlos also has a specific question about now Payara 6 is out, what are the chances of breaking free of Glassfish influence? How does it impact your evolution decisions? I'll share a blog we have about our relationship with Glassfish, but Andrew, if you want to, if you've got any thoughts on that.
So the relationship is always, or it's not always necessary, always again is a strong word, but the relationship, it was probably going to continue, if nothing else, for the time being. So recently we did actually help them out by publishing a security fix to them around root context traversal. There was a second part of that which just went into our latest release, which just went out today, which we do still need to publish to them. That's been on my to-do list to do. But the relationship of it's going to remain there for the time being, if nothing else, just because we even if as more and more of our code base changes, because we are also, I didn't mention it on the roadmap because it's not really user facing, but we are looking at doing a bit of a remodularization of Maven, so changing how the structure of the server is to better allow for us to be more extensible and plug in, plug out. So as the core code bases themselves still, even as that changes, there might be less changes being ported between them, but the actual things like Grizzly, Jersey, Weld, etc., that connection will always be there. So we're never going to break away fully, and so the influence will be there, but in that sense of there might be some similarities, but we're not following Glassfish, and I don't think we have followed Glassfish for a while. We've been doing our own things, such as, if nothing else, ages and ages ago we dropped support for their shoal clusters. We've got Hazelcast Data Grid in there now instead. So.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I think we are kind of a bit at time, but I've posted both a blog that might help with the Glassfish relationship and the link to our Payara forum in the channel, which is somewhere you can ask questions. Sometimes our engineers join in and provide answers. Sometimes other people in the community have answers. So please do drop any questions there. And yeah, make sure you're following us on LinkedIn, Twitter. We've also just recently got a Mastodon account. So if you'd like to follow us there, I'll share that in the chat. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, everyone, and for your questions, and thank you to Andrew. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.